Any cars that you know out here that you should talk? We obviously got the Ford GTLMs. We have GTLMs. Rob Kaufman, and of course Jeffrey O'Neill. He must be exhausted. I think Jeffrey's planned this brilliantly. He said, well, there could be a few problems with enough wine, or fans complaining about, their seat not being as comfortable, or the sun not being out. So he's decided, right, if I'm in the car, no one can call me.
Well, I'd seen him. I was chatting with him earlier in the weekend and said, well, so what are you driving? And he went through a list of about 4 cars that he was driving. And I said, to use a little bit of the parlance of the area, I think you've been overserved.
Yes, and as a vintner himself, I think he knew what you meant. Lovely. I think that's great. But we're looking at the Riley. Riley, what a great history they've had. And Spencer Trenery, another one of the great historic drivers of the day, and has been for many years. I'm sure you've come across him in your time.
Oh, yeah. It's fun for me to watch this. So Keith Freezer is from my neck of the woods, up kind of in the Seattle area.
In the Zytek, yep.
And I remember when he was first getting his start, a little sports racer. So it's fun to see how far he's come. And then I'm also particularly interested to watch Steve Romack, because he was out with my group earlier driving the March 761, and he's just blindingly fast.
I don't want to be rude here, but I'm going to put you in the category of not Jackie Stewart, but mere mortal. How hard is it for mere mortals to get into not hybrid, but pure racing cars like you own and like we're seeing here, and maybe not be a professional all your life racing driver and take on one of these beasts? There's a lot of respect, but also a lot of learning to do.
There is a lot of learning to do, but the reality is it just depends on how hard you want to drive the car. Right. As I tell people, so for me, my Tyrrell, 80%, easy car to drive.
Yeah.
You go to 90%, you got to be paying attention. It's, that's a car that at 90%, requires full attention. You want to drive the car north of 95%, and I have done that a time or two, but I'm very diligent in terms of which tracks I choose to drive the car at that level. But if you're going to drive it north of 95%, you've got to be absolutely on it. Yeah. Because if you make a mistake, you get bit very quickly.
Yeah, I can imagine. And at 96, the car turns around and goes, Sir Jackie, you're back! But no, I get that, and that is true of any motorsport. It's all very well to get to within half a second. It's all very well to get within 0.2 of a second. If you want to get within 0.1 of a second of the opponent you're up against, or the car that you're racing against the clock in testing, let's say, there's a huge difference.
Yeah, one of the things I'm very grateful for is that the tire technology that we use now in the historic racing, very different than the tire technology they had in the day. And so I have never pulled out a timesheet from any of the tracks that I've been on where I knew Jackie previously ran, because I don't want to try and see whether or not I can go as fast as Jackie Stewart
it's too tempting, isn't it?
So it is. I know I'm not Jackie Stewart.
Yeah.
If I was, we'd be having a conversation, because I'd be a triple world champion too.
Yeah.
So I know I'm not anywhere near what he was. So it's just, drive the car, enjoy the experience, push it as hard as you feel comfortable pushing it. But, you don't have anything to prove to anybody.
Well, and, going back to your category of those 4 days of those 4 DFR engines, one of the commentators was here earlier saying, we get better performance now than they did in the day, because we know what to do now. Right. And we look after those engines, we strip them, and we fettle them to the point where we know what they can do to keep them going. And I hadn't really given thought to that. Yeah, we know more about it. We can do more. We can put better lubricants. We can put better, we can treat those engines better than they were treated in period.
Yeah. And
that kind of means that they're better than they were in some ways. We've got a full course caution, so we'll carry on chatting. But I hadn't really. Is there anything else besides the engine that in terms of whether it be brake pads, whether it be, I don't know, you tell me.
Yeah, I certainly the brake pad technology is much better. I think even though you theoretically are running the same type of shock absorbers, I just think that the manufacturing of shocks, I think the tolerances on the manufacturing of springs, all of that's just all a little bit better than it used to be. And, those little things really end up adding up.
I've got to ask you a question. I fell in love with motorsport. My godfather was a guy called Brian Redman. I'm sure you've heard that name.
I did not know he was your godfather.
Well, he's actually my sister's godfather, to be fair. But my dad's listening in right now. He's 87. He was my dad's best man in Burnley at their wedding. Almost killed him because he drove them off in a Bentley at the end of it and was chased out of it. But I've known Brian and Marion and family for a long time. I was James's best man at his wedding. So, yeah, grown up with the Redmonds and loved every minute of it. And, of course, one of the greats, certainly here, and made his name more perhaps in the States than he did in little old England. But a great driver. But that was obviously my introduction, was to go and see Uncle Brian at Brands Hatch in 5000 or whatever he was doing. And I'd take my autograph book and get Clay Regazzoni's autograph or whoever it might be of a weekend. How did you fall in love? Where did you get the...
Boy, I think I have to tell you that really my initial introduction into motorsport was watching the Indianapolis 500.
Right. Perfect.
When I was growing up as a kid, Memorial Day weekend, the Indy 500 was on the television. That's what we watched. And
I'm sure you've been, and there's a huge difference between watching and being.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I've actually had the opportunity to run the historic F1 car on the road course in Indianapolis.
Right. Oh, fantastic.
I will tell you, I still remember coming down the main straightaway for the first time. So when you do the road course, you actually go down backwards.
Yeah.
But I'm driving down there, and I've found a little gap, and I'm kind of by myself, and I'm driving down this main straight, and I'm thinking, good Lord, this is narrow. And then I'm envisioning the race where they're coming through there at 200 miles an hour and they're 3 wide.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, how do you do that?
Yeah. And by the way, once you go over 200 miles an hour, let's say, in an Indy car, it gets narrower and narrower.
Yes. Yeah, although, the interesting thing, and I don't know that enough people talk about this, so your average fan probably doesn't fully appreciate it. But when you're in these cars, time slows down.
Yeah, exactly.
You move into a completely different time-space continuum.
Yep.
So,
and that's not an exaggeration. I've heard this a lot.
Yeah, the closest thing that I can tell people who don't race as to what it's like is hear stories. People say, well, I got into a car wreck, and
I remember everything about it.
All of a sudden, everything was moving in slow motion.
Yeah.
As a racing driver, that's the world you exist in.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember when I first started racing that I was out and I was going through a school, and the instructor was telling me, okay, when you go down the main straight, look at your gauges, make sure everything's good, check your mirrors, see who's behind you. If your seatbelts are loose, tighten up your seatbelts. And the first time I went down the main straight, it was just zip. And I thought, how do you have enough time to do all of that? And then all of a sudden, about 2 laps later, my mind made the shift. And then I'm driving down and I'm going, okay, look at the mirrors. All right, nobody's there. Look at the gauges, look fine. Belts are okay. And you start looking around. And it is a somewhat surreal experience. But if you can't have your mind shift into that world,
you can't be in a racing car. No.
You can't be in a racing car.
No, and I'll give you an example in a minute, but it just shows me when I hear stories about, I talk to a lot of racing drivers over the years, and I get that a lot about that slowing down and that ability to compartmentalize both speed, both your own situation, what's around you, being aware, and like you say, slowing your whole mind down. And it makes me think, as the scientists will tell you, we don't use a fifth, a tenth of our mind, because when you force it to fight or flight, when you force it to be in a situation that you could kill yourself in, your mind takes over and your body takes over and does strange things that you probably had no idea were possible. And I think if that's possible in a racing car, we haven't even tapped into half of it yet. Yeah. And I think as the generations go on, we will learn more about that knowledge and that ability to use that mind and use our ability. Give you one story. Jacques Villeneuve, when he was at his heyday in Formula One, I had a sit down with him at Hockenheim, and obviously driving for Williams, and I got the rare opportunity of like 25 minutes with him, and I started chatting to him, and I knew Jack was cerebral anyway, still is, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but I love him anyway. But I said to him, you know, you guys are different. What makes you guys tick? I never understand. I mean, I said, I know I couldn't be a racing driver. I said, because I don't have that last bit of me that is willing to risk all of it. And I'm talking about Formula One drivers now. I'm not talking about historics. And he said, well, let me give you an example. He said, what you don't understand is we live a different existence than most normal human beings. And he said, let me give you an example of how I can slow my brain down, or it slows down for me, so that I can deal with a racing car with ease. And I'm not being arrogant when I say that. What he said was, think about this. Yesterday, I was out going through the old Hockenheim before all the... So in the forest, and he said, I was in, what, 5th place, he said, and he said, suddenly I smelled oil. And a millisecond probably, in real time, I smelt grass. And then I smelt metal. And then I came across the accident. And he said, but all of that I had already taken on board way before that I ever saw anything. And then I saw the crash in front of me and I was able to react. And I thought to myself, and I said, you honestly felt all of those smells and senses? And he said, absolutely. That's where we are. And I mean, you know, it was a stunning comment at the time for me because I hadn't given any thought to it. But that made me realize what it takes to actually compete at that level.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's incredible just how the body reacts, or I should say, how your body has to react in order to be able to do that in those types of cars. And I mean, I have that experience in my car, and I'm probably 40 seconds a lap slower around this track than Hamilton's car was. So you can only imagine what it's like.
Yeah, but your body and your mind is going, what on earth are you doing to me? Well, listen, we're chatting away because we are under safety, or we have been under safety, because we've had another delay. We've had a few delays here, but we've had some cracking racing. We're watching Fraser, who is a friend of yours, against Stephen Romack, who is one of the best. Trenary likewise. Liebenberg in 3rd place, and it is the number 20 leading the way, the Zytek. God, we haven't used that name in a long time, but yeah, Zytek, of course. A long history in all forms of motorsport, especially in sports car racing, but Formula One, you name it. The LMP1 of Keith leading the way at the moment, a 2009 car, and 2 great Le Mans cars, and then that Riley behind, an IMSA car behind it.
Yeah, it's too bad that they're having to make so many laps under the yellow. Not really sure exactly what went on to produce the full course yellow. I just know that there were a bunch of emergency vehicles out on the track. But, you know, the fans are here. They want to see these cars run. But not only that, the drivers love driving these cars. And being behind the pace car is not what you're looking for.
Well, and also, I do a lot of single-seater stuff with the junior categories in F4 and FR. And I've had a lot of young drivers sat next to me this year talking about how hard it is to maintain under safety, especially a single-seater car, and I'm sure the same is true of sports cars, but because they weren't designed. They were designed, the air cooling, the engine, everything is designed to go fast, and that's when it's optimal, the tires, everything else. So suddenly the brakes don't work, the tires don't work, the heating is going overboard, your steering doesn't work, you've got no power steering in a single-seater, so everything is wrong, and the drivers will tell me it's the most physical, frustrating. All the adrenaline is going, where the hell do I go now? You've got me all riled up, and I'm going at 30 miles an hour behind a pace car. This is a tough time for a racing driver.
Yeah, it is a tough time, and of course, you know, a lot of times there's a follow-on incident.
Yeah.
The pace car comes off, and you go back to right, and that adrenaline's got to go somewhere, and a lot of times it goes into the right foot.
And I'm sure you sit there, because I said, do you make a plan for the restart? And you go, well, you try, but you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, here we go on the restart. You know, you try to do it, but it's just not one of those things, because anything can happen. And if you make too many plans and you stick to that plan, that could be the biggest mistake you've ever made when it comes to racing.
Yeah, and of course, the important thing is on a restart like that, you want to pay attention to your car and your circumstance. Because if you end up trying to base what you're going to do on the guy in front of you, you know, their tires may be a little colder than yours are because of the way the car is set up, and so they might have an issue somewhere, and you're not expecting them to get on the brakes as early as and you know, now you get into, again, another one of these situations where, oh gosh, we just came off a full course yellow, and I'm part of the reason why there's another one.
Well, we spoke to the racing gods, and they've given us back some laps, so
Oh,
that's
look
good.
at that.
Yeah. So we handed a quick, $20 to the steward, to the race director, and we've now got some laps back. But let's also focus in on, that's the 26. I mentioned the amazing Audi R8 GTM GT3 of 2013 that Bruce Leeson is driving from Carmel. And I was amazed when that car came out. Audi, it didn't look actually as though it was going to change the world. And the lights are out, so we're about to go racing. But it was one of those cars that for a decade totally dominated in its class around the world. Beautiful car.
Yeah, no, it's kind of funny. That car has never really spoke to me.
No, same here.
But having said that, it's been a great car.
And to beat the 911s as it did, and so many other cars, Ferraris included, no mean feat. Well, we're going racing again, finally. The green flag waves, and we're underway. And we've got your mate Keith Frieser. Is it Frieser or Frieser?
Frieser.
Frieser at the front in that Zytec LMP1, and it's going to be nip and tuck for second and third place right now between the Riley, the prototype, the Daytona prototype, Gen 1, in what, third place? What's the hard part of the circuit for you, especially at a time like this when the shadows are coming?
Well, so it's funny that you say that. We were out doing our qualifying session here on Friday, and it was about 3 o'clock.
Somebody went wide.
It was about 3 o'clock, and with the angle of the sun, when you would come up into turn 2, the sun was straight into your eyes.
Ugh.
You could not even see turn 2. That was quite horrifying.
I've got a feeling that could have been the leader,
Yes.
because suddenly he's disappeared.
Yes.
He came. I definitely saw from the drone that he got back on track, but he went way out into the dirt for a second, and now the 24 of Steve Romack leads comfortably.
So, yeah, well, could have been that problem with cold tires.
That's more than likely first heavy braking into the right-hander anyway. There he is. Well, he's got back. Now he's on. Now he's frustrated. And you're right. This goes to exactly what we've been talking about now. You've just gone through an adrenaline moment, oh my God, I need new overalls moment, and God, I got that wrong. Why did I do that? God, I should have known better. And you've got to control all of that, haven't you?
You do have to control all that. If you do it right, it can be great. I've turned some of my fastest laps right after I have done something stupid.
Bit of red mist.
Yes. But again, it's one of those, you've got to be in control of your emotions and your abilities. And okay, you had it off, you're frustrated, you got a little additional aggression. If you channel that properly, that can end up resulting in some quicker laps.
Yep, no question about it. I wish motor racing was more affordable, because I think we could teach youth quickly about the disciplines of life in racing. As in life, as in racing, you can learn so much from being around a paddock, not just being a racing driver, but learning about the whole process of working as a team and working in a unit and having to rely on other humans and not just yourself.
Somebody else that just got into the dirt there at the exit of 4.
Well, they're pushing because they're frustrated now, you see. We've held them too long. They're like racehorses, chomping at the bit. Nice story about the Parmentier brothers from Belgium, just from Spa, as we take a look at Chris Liebenberg. And that Mammoth-sponsored 55 car, a beautiful Celine 7. God, I haven't seen one of those for a while. But, 2006. And Celine also great history at Le Mans. Sounds great too. I went to Le Mans when, do you remember the red, white and green Mazda, the Screamers as they were called? They had them at Goodwood last year. And I spent a whole Le Mans as a kid, as a young 25-year-old, just sitting there in the dark, listening to the 8 miles of this Mazda going around. It was like, ee! I was actually talking to somebody who was working that event, and they said we were judging when our car would come around when we could hear the Mazdas, because it was that obvious and that different as a squeal. Great car.
I have never had the opportunity to go to Le Mans, so it's something that's on my wish list.
Got to. Well, you're talking about Brian Redman. I had the privilege of literally hanging out with Brian when Aston Martin returned to Le Mans. And he, of course, was basically their factory driver along with a couple of others. But they got 10th place. Brian never won Le Mans. He did it so many times, and so many great teammates from Siffert to Ix to Bell to you name it, but just never won it.
Yeah, it takes a lot to win that race.
Takes a lot of luck too.
Well, you got to have a good car, you got to have a good team, you got to have good co-drivers, but you got to have good luck.
Yeah, there's so many instances, and you could write books on the guys that nearly made it. I was talking to Martin Lauber yesterday, and he said his son's favorite car is that car because it's the Hot Wheels car. That's the one I like, Dad. Drive that one.
So, well, that's okay. Whatever gets him interested.
Absolutely. It's funny, you know, I didn't grow up in the era of Hot Wheels. I grew up in the era of Matchbox cars, and I used to have an Emerson Fittipaldi JPS, and I used to have a Mario Andretti. I had that Yardley McLaren that was out there today. So, you know, that was how I started out, was to watch all that, or to collect those kind of things. Now, that's the 911. That's the 991 GT3R from 2016. So that's probably our most modern car out there at the moment.
Well, I was a Hot Wheels kid. And actually, I have an interesting story about that.
Go for it.
My dad's fraternity brother in college graduated with a mechanical engineering degree and ultimately found his way to Mattel.
Oh.
And was one of the guys that invented Hot Wheels.
Ah, great story.
And so when my folks would go down to, you know, the Los Angeles area and they'd stop in to visit him,
pick up a
every
Hot Wheel.
time they came home, I had new Hot Wheels. So
oh,
I had
wow. No wonder you were
cars
into
and
it.
Tracks and all kinds of great stuff. And I laugh because, you know, now they're very collectible. And I'll look on eBay or whatever every now and then and see one of these cars and it's selling for some ridiculous sum of money.
Oh, yeah.
I said,
collector's items, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I had one of those, but it's not anywhere near collector's condition.
I know.
Because, you know, my buddies and I, we used to tape caps on the front of them and you'd start them off at one end and smash them into each other.
Yep.
It was great fun.
Absolutely. Now, Henri Pescarola is a name that you will not forget. And, of course, there is the 2011 Pescarola Morgan. Don't see that too often. Steve Romack and is about to take the final lap in that Pescarola. But Henri, synonymous with Le Mans, of course. I don't know how many times he won Le Mans. It was probably 5 or 6. I can't remember. But he has been an institution there over the years. Many times participant, and names car after his name. That just shows you what you mean to both the mark and to the event. But Steve Romack's going to wander on because Keith Fresher sadly went wide and will finish still third. But Romack coming and making his way now to the last few corners here in our Group 9 feature race.
Yeah, Steve was talking with me a little bit about how challenging it is to make the change from driving his March Formula One car from 1976 and then getting into this car and driving this car.
Oh, chalk of cheese, right?
So, yeah, I mean, you know, this is paddle shifters,
yeah,
two pedals, you know.
This is a video game in comparison.
Yeah, March 761, 5-speed manual gearbox. And
out of turn 11 he comes here at Sonoma. And the lights blazing as the sun goes down here. It's been a wonderful day. And it's not over yet as the checkered flag waves for Steve Romack, who takes that Pescarola Morgan from 2011 to a wonderful victory. Sad that we had a little bit of a safety car there and had to slow things down. Keith Fraser, who led for a long time in the Zytec, or ZTEC, whatever you prefer, 2009, in second place in the LMP1 Zytec, and then in third, Spencer Treneray in that Riley Gen 1 Daytona prototype. That's the top three. Doug Barron fourth, Bruce Lesson in fifth place, Lauren Beggs, Alan Turpins in seventh, Ken Say in eighth, Thomas Parmentier in ninth, and Carrie Einlaw in 10th. My thanks to John Dimmer for coming in. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and get an insight. I saw your car, as I said, and I had to come and introduce myself because I knew you had a story in it, and it is a great one.
So, well, thank you very much. I enjoyed being here. Really appreciative to the Velocity folks for having such a great event and such great cars. And look forward to doing this again in future years.
I'm sure we will, and I'm sure you'll be back, and I'll be watching your progress now. How many events do you do a year?
I'll probably do about 5 to 6 events a year.
Perfect number. Well, listen, thank you for joining us here in the booth, and thank you for entertaining us here out on track. It's been a wonderful weekend.